Polaroid camera, an absolute photography icon. Famous for capturing those special spontaneous moments and turning them instantaneously into memories without too much effort or process. Unfortunately, I don't own a Polaroid camera, but I do own one of these, a smart telephone, arguably the digital age's answer to the Polaroid. Press a button and hey presto, you've got an instantaneous memory to share. However, in many photographers' view, the smart telephone doesn't have the retro appeal of the Polaroid, nor its cult-following quality. Indeed, it's just one of those practical things that we all carry around with us that just happens to have a camera in it. These days, if we take a quick snap with one of these devices without too much thought or process involved, it's seen as a little bit of a cop-out, maybe cheating. Something for the youth to share on Instagram and instantaneously be lost amongst all the other dross that's out there on social media. No, if you want to be a proper photographer and take proper photos, you need a proper camera. Or do we? In this video, I want to share with you 4 reasons why I think that we shouldn't underestimate the power of the humble snapshot. My story begins at the start of a 54-mile-long walk from the city of Manchester to my home near Leeds, not because my car had broken down, but just because it was something to do. Instead of taking all of my cumbersome camera equipment with me, weighing me down and slowing me down, I decided to just rely on my humble smart telephone, and to add a nod to the Polaroid, I decided to take every photograph in square format. As my train pulled into Manchester Victoria, like everybody else flooding onto the platforms, I couldn't wait to get out of Manchester, so I headed up towards the Rochdale Canal to start my journey home, and I took my first few snaps along the way. It wasn't long until I realised the first reason why I think that we shouldn't underestimate the snapshot. As I was walking along, I found myself snapping away at just things that inspired me, little observations at the side of the path. I wasn't thinking about what camera settings I needed to set, or indeed what composition rule would work for this particular shot. I was just pointing and shooting at things that interested me. Not aiming for photographic perfection, I found myself letting down my guard a little bit, being more spontaneous, more experimental with what I was photographing. Because I wasn't being dictated by what we should be doing, I was doing what I thought was right in that given situation. I think by doing a task like this, it helps us to become more free as photographers, understand what it is that we actually like to photograph, rather than always being dictated to by other photographers that think that they know better. I was reaching my first milestone of the walk, the crossing of Manchester's orbital motorway, the M60, as I made a bolt for freedom. Trying to make that note of what was drawing my eye, I noticed that I was being drawn in by lines, shapes and structures within the architecture, but also that little influence of nature creeping in as well. It just so happened that from this point on, the walk started to get more natural. I saw some goats at the side of the path and some horses, and blimey, look at the size of that bull's testicles. From a photography perspective, it appeared that I was still being drawn in by that juxtaposition between human influence and nature. The more miles I clocked up, the more the second reason why I think that we shouldn't underestimate the snapshot came to mind. A lot of photographers come to me and complain about 2 things in particular. Firstly, the size and weight of their camera slowing them down. And secondly, when they go out with family or friends, they feel like a burden because they're always stopping to think about the next photograph. But I think the snapshot negates both of these things. Firstly, a smart telephone just slips in your pocket and therefore slips out again when you want to take a photograph. And secondly, because we're not having to think so much about the process involved in making that photograph, we're just snapping away at what's inspired us, then a photograph just takes seconds rather than the minutes that it could do if we're setting up a tripod and setting our cameras and composing the perfect shot. After seeing some goats fighting over their nanny, I was approaching the highest point on the Rochdale Canal, which meant only one thing: salvation was ahead. I was about to cross the border back into Yorkshire. The beautiful hills of home were looming on the horizon, and it was soon time to leave the canal, but not before I took a few more photographs of its structure before I left. As my path started to climb, beautiful views developed of the valley below, and I started to wonder, as the landscape became more rugged, would my choice of photograph change? Looking at these photos, although the scenery has changed, my attention to the lines, the shapes and structures and the human influence definitely has stayed. I was now following the Pennine Bridleway as it snaked around the hills above Calderdale, underneath the dramatic monument of Studley Pike that stands proud over my next milestone, the town of Hebden Bridge. Just before I started my descent down into the beautiful valley, I came across this wonderful tractor, and as well as giving it a sniff, I had to take a few shots as well. As the leafy lanes meandered down the hillside towards the halfway point of my walk, past a friendly horse, I rejoined the Rochdale Canal, only briefly though, because very soon it was time to climb again as we headed over towards the Worth Valley. Leaving Hebden Bridge, the path started to go up and up and up and up and up a bit more, so I took the excuse to pause and take my breath and take a few photographs as well. It's at this point where, on long-distance walks that I've done in the past, my mind has started to turn towards the amount of post-production that I'm going to have to do on my RAW files when I get home. But that's where the third reason why I think that we shouldn't underestimate the snapshot comes in, because it saves us time, not just when we're out and about in the field, but when it comes to editing our shots afterwards. Yes, with a smart telephone you might want to do the odd little tweak to your photographs, but you often find that the software in the phone itself is pretty good at giving you a decent representation without doing anything to it. Indeed, the photographs that you're seeing in this video are all done just through the phone, no editing involved at all. After crossing the highest point on my walk, I was heading down into the Worth Valley, and when you're in the Worth Valley, your eye is always going to be drawn in by the heritage railway line that runs straight through it. That and a horse that had escaped onto the path. As I passed through the quaint town of Haworth, famous for the Bronte sisters and the railway children, I couldn't help but snap some of the railway infrastructure. My route continued to follow the railway line, past Oakworth Station and over the hills towards Keighley. Keighley is quite an industrial town, and I think that shows in the photographs that I made of this old decaying mill and then some interesting, more modern structures. After leaving Keighley, I was back on the canal, but this time it was the Leeds to Liverpool canal, which meanders through some beautiful countryside and past some iconic structures, just like the famous Bingley Five-Rise locks. It was interesting to see, as the sun came out, how my photographs started to become more and more dictated by the light, the colours, and the shadows that were presenting themselves. With muscles pulled in all different directions after walking all these miles, every step was becoming more and more painful, but I knew that home was now not too far away as I wandered through my next milestone on the route, the World Heritage Site of Saltaire, famous for its majestic mill. As I limped through these towering structures, home was getting closer with every single step. As I passed through the town of Shipley, it was getting closer to the point of leaving the canal once and for all, crossing over the River Aire and heading back up through the woods towards home, taking a few final shots on the way. So the snapshot can help us to understand who we are as photographers and what we ultimately want to photograph. Instead of going by predefined processes and thought patterns, we can dive beyond that and just be more spontaneous and experimental in what we photograph. It allows us to be quicker and more speedy whilst we're out in the field, without the weight behind us slowing us down. And it'll also allow us to do less post-production if that's something that you want to avoid. As soon as you see a square format photograph surrounded by a white border that's slightly longer at the bottom, you automatically think that's a Polaroid photograph. Because we subconsciously make those cultural connections, it automatically gives that photograph charm, even if the content of the frame is not necessarily making it a banger. If I hadn't have told you that all of the photographs that you've seen in this video were taken on a smartphone, completely unprocessed, and were just random snaps of me doing a long distance walk, then you probably would have just taken them on face value. Yes, process is part of photography, but ultimately the success of a photograph comes down to the way it's presented. You could scroll past a series of photographs on Instagram and just keep going, but see the same photographs in frames on a wall of a gallery, then you're much more likely to look at them for longer and hold them in higher regard. So a humble snapshot, no matter what medium it's taken in, instead of becoming a throwaway image or a record shot, can potentially become a proper photograph.